You know, there comes a moment in life, quiet, subtle, when you are not just physically tired, but soul tired. Not the kind of fatigue that sleep can fix, but something deeper. A spiritual exhaustion, as if you've been swimming against the current for too long, and yet, in that silence, something watches, something listens. God, the eternal, the unseen, is not distant. No, he is intimately aware of your weariness. Not a single sigh escapes his notice. But here is the paradox when you are at your most tired. What is required is not more effort, but less. Not striving, but surrender. And that, my friend, is where it all begins. Pray. Wait. Trust. You see, there's a kind of tiredness that goes far beyond what sleep or a vacation can fix. It's not the kind of fatigue that a cup of coffee or a day off will solve. It is something much deeper, quieter, and often harder to name. It is the exhaustion of the soul. A tiredness that lives under the surface of your skin, behind your eyes, and deep within your spirit. You may go about your day with a smile, doing what needs to be done, saying what needs to be said, but inside, you feel stretched thin, like a thread about to snap. And the strange thing is, most people won't see it. They won't notice. Because exhaustion of this kind often wears a disguise. It looks like strength, like responsibility, like being the dependable one. But you know the truth. Inside, you're tired. And not just tired, you're worn out. We live in a world that constantly tells you to go, to strive, to push harder, to never stop. And so, many of us carry burdens that were never meant to be carried alone. The expectations, the silent battles, the disappointments that accumulate slowly over time. The fear that maybe we're falling behind. That maybe we're not enough. And in the middle of it all, we get tired. Not just because of the effort, but because of the feeling that it might all be for nothing. That perhaps the path we're walking is leading nowhere. That perhaps God is silent. That perhaps no one really sees what we're going through. But I want to tell you something that may sound simple. Yet it is profoundly true. God knows. He knows. He sees the weariness you don't speak of. He sees the way you keep showing up, even when you have nothing left to give. He sees the tears that don't fall, the ones you've learned to hold back so you can keep moving forward. He sees the long nights where your thoughts run wild and your prayers feel unanswered. He knows. And more than that, he understands. This is not a distant God who watches from the heavens, indifferent to human pain. This is a God who walked among us, who wept, who bled, who felt the weight of human sorrow. And so when he sees your exhaustion, he does not shame you for it. He does not say, "Get it together." He whispers, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest, not judgment, not more demands. Rest." But here's the part we often forget. Acknowledging our exhaustion is not a weakness. In fact, it's a kind of sacred honesty. To say, "I am tired," is not to admit defeat. It's to speak truth. And truth is where God meets us. Not in the masks we wear, not in the performances we give, but in the raw, unfiltered reality of our inner world. It is there, in that place of openness, that he begins to minister to us, to restore, to renew. There's a strange beauty in reaching the end of ourselves. Because when we are no longer able to rely on our own strength, we begin to make space for something greater. When our hands are too weak to keep holding everything together, we finally release what we were never meant to control. And in that letting go, in that sacred unraveling, we find that God has been holding us all along. So maybe today, you don't need another motivational push. Maybe you don't need another "keep going" or "stay strong." Maybe what you need is permission to rest, to breathe, to be human, and to believe even in your weariness that you are not forgotten, that you are not a failure for feeling tired, that your tiredness is not a sign of weakness, but a sign that you have been carrying something heavy for far too long. Maybe what you need most is not a solution, but presence. Not immediate answers, but assurance. The assurance that God is near, even when you feel far. That he is for you, even when everything seems against you. That he loves you, not because you're productive or positive or perfect, but because you are his. Simply that. You are his. And maybe, just maybe, the very moment you feel like giving up is the moment heaven is closest to you. because it is often in those quiet, broken spaces that the most profound transformation begins. Not in the rush, not in the noise, but in the stillness that comes when we finally say, God, I'm tired. Help me. This is not the end. It is a beginning born not out of strength, but of surrender. A beginning that invites you to stop striving and start trusting, to stop pretending and start praying, and to believe that even in your most tired state, you are seen, known, and deeply loved. You may not always hear Him, and you may not always feel Him, but let me assure you, God sees you. He is not blind to your pain, nor deaf to your silence. There's a mystery in how the divine observes us, not from a distance like some faraway judge, but intimately, as though He is sitting quietly in the very room where you ache. In moments when you can barely lift your head or form the words to pray, He is already aware. The tears you wipe away quickly before anyone notices, the heavy sighs in the quiet of the night, the effort it takes just to get through the day, none of it is lost on Him. You don't need to shout to get God's attention. You don't need grand gestures or poetic prayers. Your very existence is heard. Your very breath is a prayer. He knows the story behind every silence, every pause, every glance you cast toward heaven when you don't know what else to say. You are not invisible. You've never been. You are not unseen, not by the one who fashioned you in the womb, who numbered every hair on your head, who knows your thoughts before you think them, who understands the language of your soul before your mouth ever speaks. Sometimes we imagine God to be like people, impatient, distracted, needing reminders that we are struggling. But God doesn't forget you just because you're quiet. He doesn't withdraw His love because you're not as faithful as you think you should be. On the contrary, His gaze is fixed on you all the more when you're struggling to hold on. He is not just present when your faith is strong, when your voice is confident, or when your spirit is joyful. He is present in the moments of doubt, in the quiet battles, in the times when you are barely holding yourself together. It's one thing to know that God exists. It's something far deeper to know that He sees. That in a world of billions, your particular pain, your individual journey, your unique trials matter to Him. Not in a vague or generalized way, but intimately, deeply, personally. That is the love of God. He doesn't just love humanity. He loves you. He doesn't just see the collective suffering of the world. He sees your weariness, your confusion, your heartbreak, your hope. And He is not passively observing. He is not merely noting down your struggles like some distant observer writing in a book. He is moved by compassion. He is with you. The Scriptures do not say that God watches us from afar. They say that He draws near to the brokenhearted, that He is a refuge and a shelter, that He is an ever-present help in times of trouble. Ever present. What a phrase! It means He is here right now as you read this, not waiting for you to improve, not waiting for you to get back to some imagined spiritual standard. Right now, in your tiredness and uncertainty, He is near. Perhaps this is the greatest misunderstanding so many carry, that God only shows up when we are at our best. But what if the opposite is true? What if the very place where you feel most broken is the place where God is building something sacred? What if your weariness is not a barrier to His presence, but an invitation to lean deeper into it? In the stillness, in the moments where nothing seems to be changing, when prayers feel unanswered and direction feels absent, God is still watching, still guiding. Sometimes, what we perceive as divine silence is actually God doing His most important work. The roots grow deep in winter, unseen. The healing takes place beneath the surface, before it ever shows outwardly. So even though you may feel like you're in the middle of a void, know this: God is not far. You are not forgotten. He is the God who saw Hagar in the wilderness, alone and afraid, and called Himself El Roi, the God who sees me. He saw her running, He saw her crying, and He gave her a promise. And that same God sees you, not as a project to fix, not as a disappointment to manage, but as His child, precious, worthy of love, worthy of His time and attention. This is where trust begins, not in the certainty of outcomes, but in the certainty of being seen. When you know that you are fully visible to God, you stop needing to perform for Him. You stop needing to impress heaven with your strength. You can simply be. And being is enough. Your presence, your breath, your heart that still beats even when it's heavy, that is enough. So when you feel invisible in this world, overlooked, unheard, pushed to the background, remember that you are never invisible to Him. The world may not know your story, but God does. The world may not honor your silent battles, but God does. The world may not notice the nights you spend praying for answers, the days you keep going without applause, but He notices. He holds those moments like treasure. You are not unseen. You are seen fully, completely, and with more love than your mind can fathom. And when you truly understand that you are seen by God, it changes everything. It doesn't always change the circumstances, but it changes you. It gives you the courage to keep walking even when the path is unclear. It gives you peace in the midst of storms. It gives you strength, not because the burden disappears, but because you know you are not carrying it alone. You are walking in the presence of the one who sees it all, understands it all, and never turns away. So don't be afraid to be honest with God. Don't be afraid to let Him see your weakness. He already does, and still He chooses to stay. Always. Prayer is often misunderstood. Many approach it as a transaction. Ask and receive, speak and be answered. But real prayer, the kind that touches eternity, is not about saying the right words or impressing God with eloquence. It's not about formulas or rituals. It's about presence, stillness, connection. Prayer in its truest form is not something you perform. It's something you enter. It's not merely talking to God. It's being with God. It's the sacred silence of the heart turned toward the divine, even when there are no words left to say. There are moments in life when you don't even know what to pray for. The pain is too great, the confusion too thick, and your soul too tired to form a coherent thought. And in those moments, you might wonder if your silence disappoints God. You might believe that your lack of words means you've failed at faith. But nothing could be further from the truth. Because God is not measuring your spiritual life by the length of your prayers. He is not checking off how many verses you've quoted or how long you've knelt. He is looking at your heart. And sometimes the most powerful prayer is the one you never speak out loud. It's the tear sliding down your cheek. It's the sigh you let out when you think no one's listening. It's the simple turning of your soul in God's direction, even if you don't have the strength to move your lips. There's a sacredness in that kind of prayer. The kind born not out of habit or obligation, but out of deep need, deep hunger. When you pray from a place of desperation, not to manipulate God, but to be near Him, you are stepping into a space of profound intimacy. You are saying, without words, God, I'm here. I don't have answers. I don't even know what I need. But I know I need you. And that, right there, is enough. We've been taught to speak when we pray, but we often forget to listen. We speak and then walk away, wondering why we don't hear anything in return. But what if prayer isn't a speech to heaven, but a conversation? What if it's not about filling the space with noise, but learning to be comfortable in the quiet? God often whispers. He speaks in stillness. He moves not with flashes of lightning, but with the gentle nudges of peace, with the quiet reminders that you are not alone. In a world obsessed with speed and productivity, we forget how to be still. We treat prayer like another task to check off, another spiritual duty to complete. But God isn't calling you to hustle your way into His presence. He's inviting you to come as you are, not polished, not prepared, just present. That's all He asks, that you show up. That you bring your honest self without pretending, without performance. Prayer is not about becoming someone else. It's about revealing who you truly are and trusting that even in your rawest state, you are deeply loved. There is no wrong way to pray when the heart is sincere. Whether your words are poetic or broken, whether you pray out loud or in the silence of your mind, God hears. He hears the whisper beneath your thoughts. He hears the longing behind your confusion. And most of all, He hears the faith it takes just to turn to Him when you feel empty. That act alone, the act of turning toward Him, however weakly, is prayer, and it is powerful. It's important to remember that prayer is not a magic formula to control God's hand. It's not a guarantee that your circumstances will instantly change. But it is the open door to relationship. It's the sacred space where you let God into your pain, your uncertainty, your questions. And in that space, He doesn't always give answers. Sometimes He gives something even more profound Himself. His presence, His peace, His quiet reassurance that even if everything around you is shifting, He is steady, unmoving, faithful. There's a reason we're told to pray continually. It's not because God needs constant updates on our life. It's because we need constant reminders that we are not alone. Prayer aligns our hearts with God's heart. It recenters us when the world pulls us in every direction. It reminds us that there is something greater than what we see, that there is a plan unfolding even when we don't understand it. And most of all, it reminds us that we are deeply known and deeply loved. So if you're tired and your prayers have become quiet, don't be discouraged. The most honest prayers are often the simplest. Help me? Be near. I don't know what to do. These are enough. They are real. They are raw. And they are more powerful than 1,000 scripted lines. God is not moved by performance. He is moved by honesty. He leans in when you stop trying to be perfect and simply come to Him as you are. Let prayer become your resting place, not your responsibility. Let it be the place where you lay down your burdens, not pick up new ones. Let it be where you return again and again, not to change God, but to be changed by Him, because in that sacred space where your soul meets His presence, something begins to shift. Not always outside you, but within you. Peace begins to grow where there was anxiety. Hope rises where there was despair. And strength slowly returns, not the strength of striving, but the strength of being held. That is the quiet power of prayer. Not that it always fixes the storm, but that it reminds you who is in the boat with you. And that, my friend, makes all the difference. So much of our exhaustion, our worry, our anxiety, comes from this desperate attempt to hold everything together, to be in control, to make sense of every outcome, every decision, every twist in the road. We live with the belief, often unspoken but deeply rooted, that if we just try hard enough, think long enough, plan thoroughly enough, we can keep the pieces of our lives from falling apart, that we can somehow guard ourselves from disappointment, heartbreak, or failure. And so we tighten our grip. We try to manage the uncontrollable. We become the puppet master of 1,000 invisible strings, trying to pull them all just right. But life doesn't bend to our will. Circumstances shift. People change. Doors close unexpectedly. The future unfolds in ways we never could have predicted. And no matter how much we plan or prepare, there will always be moments where we feel completely out of our depth. And that's where the real weariness sets in, not from the actual work of life, but from the illusion that we're supposed to be in charge of it all. This illusion of control is exhausting. It's heavy. It demands that we live in a constant state of alertness, always anticipating what could go wrong, always bracing ourselves for what might not go our way. It convinces us that if we stop striving, everything will fall apart. That if we don't have the answers, then we're failing. But the truth, the liberating, deeply spiritual truth, is this: we were never meant to carry that weight. We were never meant to be the architects of every outcome. We are not God. There is a kind of peace that only comes when we finally acknowledge our limits. When we say, I don't know what's next. I don't have all the answers. And that's okay. It's not giving up, it's giving in. It's surrendering not in defeat, but in trust. Trust that there is a wisdom greater than ours at work. Trust that life, while unpredictable, is not meaningless. Trust that God is still writing the story, even when the pages feel blank. When we let go of the need to control everything, we make space for something far more powerful to enter grace. We begin to live in rhythm with something beyond ourselves. We stop fighting the current and start flowing with it. We stop trying to force doors open and start noticing the ones that God quietly opens for us. We stop clinging to our own plans and start asking, what are you doing here, God? And how can I be part of it? Letting go doesn't mean you stop caring. It doesn't mean you stop showing up. It means you stop believing the lie that everything rests on your shoulders. It means you stop treating life as a problem to solve and start seeing it as a journey to experience. You begin to realize that control was never the goal. Peace was. And peace doesn't come from holding tighter. It comes from releasing your grip. One of the most spiritual things you can do is exhale. Truly exhale. To breathe out the tension, the fear, the pressure. To say, God, I can't carry this anymore, and I don't have to. That is not weakness. That is wisdom. That is maturity. That is what trust looks like. We often think that surrender means things will get worse, that everything will spiral out of control if we don't manage it. But surrender is not the same as chaos. In fact, true surrender often leads to clarity. When you stop trying to control outcomes, your vision becomes clearer. You begin to see what actually matters. You begin to hear the still, small voice that's been drowned out by your own inner noise. You begin to find direction, not through overthinking, but through quiet awareness. God does not ask you to understand everything. He asks you to trust Him through everything. And that trust doesn't have to be loud or confident. It can be quiet, fragile. It can simply be the decision to rest, even when the path ahead is unclear. That choice alone, to rest in the middle of uncertainty, is an act of faith more powerful than 1,000 words. There is a reason Jesus said, "Take my yoke upon you, for my burden is light." He wasn't saying that life would be easy. He was saying that with Him, the burden becomes bearable. Because He is carrying it with you. You are not meant to figure it all out. You are meant to walk in step with the One who already knows the way. And sometimes, walking in step means stopping, resting, waiting. Not pushing harder, but being still enough to hear His voice again, to feel His presence again. To remember that He is God, and you are not. That's not an insult to your strength. That's an invitation to live free. So when the weight gets heavy, and the path gets unclear, ask yourself gently, what am I trying to control that was never mine to carry? Where am I exhausting myself trying to make something happen that only God can do? And can I, even just for a moment, loosen my grip? Let go. Not because everything is okay, but because holding on is making you sick. Let go. Not because you've lost faith, but because you've finally found it. Faith that trusts in God's plan more than your own. Faith that says, even here, even now, I believe you are working. Even when I don't understand. And in that release, something beautiful happens. You start to feel light again. Not because your situation has changed, but because your soul has. Because you've remembered the truth that sets you free. You were never meant to be in control. You were meant to trust the One who is. Waiting is not easy. In fact, it might be one of the hardest things we ever have to do. Especially when we're waiting on God. When we've prayed, when we've cried, when we've laid everything at His feet, and still, silence. Still, no change. Still, nothing that looks like progress. It's in these moments that the heart starts to grow restless. Doubts begin to creep in. We start wondering if we've been forgotten. If maybe we misunderstood, or were simply mistaken in our faith. Waiting feels like standing still while the world moves on around you. It can feel lonely, frustrating, and even painful. But waiting is not wasting. Just because nothing seems to be happening doesn't mean God isn't working. Some of the most important things God does in your life happen in the waiting. You may not see it with your eyes, you may not feel it in your emotions, but something deep, quiet, and lasting is being formed inside you. Waiting is where roots grow deep. Waiting is where character is shaped, where faith is purified, and where your heart is prepared for what's coming next. We live in a culture obsessed with immediacy. Fast food, instant downloads, overnight delivery. We've been conditioned to expect quick results and instant gratification. But God doesn't operate on our timeline. He is not in a rush. And that can be maddening when we're desperate for resolution. But the truth is, God's timing is not slow, it's perfect. He sees what you cannot see. He knows what you cannot know. And sometimes, what feels like a delay is actually divine protection. What feels like a setback is actually setting the stage for something greater. There's a reason the Bible says, They that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. Not they that run, not they that strive, not they that control. They that wait. Waiting is not passive. It's not doing nothing. It's choosing to stay grounded in faith, even when everything in you wants to rush ahead. It's trusting the process. It's standing still while God moves on your behalf. In the waiting, your trust is tested. You begin to ask, do I trust God's plan even when it doesn't match my own? Do I trust His silence as much as I trust His voice? Can I believe that He's doing something even now, even when I can't feel it? That kind of trust doesn't come easily. It's forged in the fire of delay, in the long nights and the empty spaces. It's born when you learn to lean not on your own understanding, but on something higher, wiser, and eternal. Sometimes we want the blessing, but we're not ready for it. Sometimes God has to grow us before He gives to us. If He gave us what we asked for too soon, we might mishandle it. We might not have the strength, the wisdom, or the humility to carry it well. So in His mercy He waits, not to punish us, but to prepare us, not to withhold from us, but to deepen us. Because what God wants to give you is not just a moment of satisfaction, but a life of significance. And that kind of life takes time. Think of the seed buried in the ground. It looks like nothing is happening. It's hidden, unseen. But under the surface, transformation is taking place. Roots are growing, foundations are forming. And when the time is right, it breaks through the soil, not because it was rushed, but because it was ready. That is what waiting on God looks like. You are the seed. And though it feels like darkness now, there is growth happening that you cannot yet see. You may be tempted to give up in the waiting, to settle for something less, to take matters into your own hands. But don't trade the greatness God is preparing for the convenience of now. Don't sabotage your own promise just because patience is hard. Stay where you are planted. Trust that the same God who began a good work in you will carry it to completion. In His time, not yours. And when the waiting gets long, don't isolate. Don't silence your heart. Talk to God. Pour out your doubts. Be honest. He can handle it. Prayer doesn't have to be perfect to be powerful. Even a frustrated, "God, I don't understand," is still a prayer. And in those raw, vulnerable moments, you'll begin to hear something subtle and real, the whisper of a God who is still near, still watching, still writing your story. There's a strength that grows only in stillness. There's a faith that is built only in delay. There's a trust that is born only when you've run out of your own answers and are forced to lean into His. And that trust, that unshakable belief that God is good even when life doesn't feel good, that is what will carry you forward. Not your strength, not your plans, not your control, but your surrender. So take heart. If you're in a season of waiting, you are not being punished. You are being prepared. You are not forgotten. You are being formed. And when the time is right, what God has planned will be more beautiful than anything you could have forced into being on your own. He is never late. He is never early. He is always, always right on time. And until that time comes, wait with hope. Wait with trust. Wait with expectation. Because the God who makes you wait is the same God who will make it worth it. Trust is one of those quiet words we hear often, but rarely sit with long enough to feel its depth. It's not loud. It doesn't demand attention. But it's powerful, so powerful, in fact, that your entire relationship with God hinges on it. Trust is not simply believing that God exists. It's believing that He is good, that He is for you. That even when life doesn't make sense, even when the doors don't open and the prayers seem unanswered, He's still working things together for your good. But let's be honest, trusting God is not always easy. It's beautiful in theory, but incredibly difficult in the raw places of life. When the healing doesn't come, when the job falls through, when the people you counted on walk away, that's when trust becomes more than a nice word. It becomes a decision, a daily decision. To believe that God's silence doesn't mean absence, that His timing isn't cruel, that even when you feel forgotten, you are held in the palm of His hand. You see, trust begins where understanding ends. We all want clarity. We want to know why things happen, when they'll get better, and how it's all going to work out. But God rarely hands us a roadmap. Instead, He invites us to take the next step without all the answers. That's hard, because deep down we think trust means certainty. We think if we trust God, then life should be smooth. But real trust is not about the absence of storms. It's about finding peace in the middle of them. God isn't asking you to understand everything right now. He's not demanding that you have it all figured out. He's simply asking you to trust that He does, that He sees the entire picture while you only see a piece. Imagine looking at a single puzzle piece, awkward, irregular, confusing. If you didn't know it was part of something larger, you'd think it was meaningless. But once it's placed in the full image, it makes sense. That's how life is. Right now you're holding a single piece, and it might not make sense. But trust says, God, I believe you're putting the whole picture together. And even if I don't see it yet, I know you're doing something good. Trust is not about pretending everything is fine. It's not about forcing a smile or reciting verses to avoid dealing with pain. No, trust is gritty. It's raw. It's saying, God, I'm scared, I'm confused, I'm tired. But I still believe you are who you say you are. That's what faith looks like in real life. Not perfection. Not certainty. Just a heart that chooses to lean, even when it would be easier to run. Think of Abraham, who was told to leave everything he knew and go to a place God would show him. Not a map, not coordinates, just a promise. Think of Joseph, sold by his brothers, imprisoned unfairly, forgotten by people he helped. Yet God used every moment to position him for something greater. Think of Mary, a young girl told she would carry the Son of God without fully knowing the cost. Over and over, Scripture shows us that trust is not about understanding the plan, but about knowing the one who made the promise. And here's something else to remember. God doesn't just want you to trust Him with the big things, your calling, your future, your breakthrough. He wants you to trust Him in the small things too, with your emotions, your daily routine, your relationships, your disappointments. The things you think are too trivial for prayer are often the very areas where trust is formed. Because trust isn't built in the mountaintop moments, it's forged in the quiet valleys, in the questions, in the waiting rooms of life, in the times when all you have is a whisper and a choice to believe that God is still with you. Trust doesn't eliminate fear, but it quiets it. Trust doesn't remove uncertainty, but it changes your posture in the middle of it. You stop grasping for control and begin to open your hands. You stop demanding answers and start seeking presence. You begin to say things like, even if I don't get what I asked for, I know you haven't abandoned me. That kind of trust transforms your entire perspective. It doesn't always change your situation, but it always changes you. The truth is, we often measure God's goodness by how comfortable our lives are. But God is not just concerned with comfort. He's committed to growth. And growth often happens through tension, through pressure, through surrender. Trust is what turns pain into purpose. It's what allows God to use even the broken parts of your story for beauty. Because nothing is wasted. Not your tears, not your waiting, not your confusion. God collects it all, and He weaves it into something far greater than you could imagine. So today, wherever you find yourself, whether on a mountain, in a valley, or somewhere in between, ask yourself, can I let go of the need to understand and choose to trust instead? Can I trust that God knows what He's doing, even when I don't? Can I believe that His plan is still good, even when life feels hard? The answer doesn't have to be loud. You don't need perfect faith, you just need a willing heart, a heart that says, God, I trust you. Not because I see the way, but because I know who you are. And that's enough. That's more than enough. Because in the end, trust is not about having control. It's about resting in the arms of the one who does. There's something sacred about stillness, something deeply spiritual about moments when you stop striving, stop rushing, stop trying to fix everything, and simply be. But stillness is hard, especially in a world that prizes hustle and productivity, that measures your worth by what you do, how fast you achieve, how much you can produce. We've been taught that being still is lazy, that resting is weakness, that if you're not moving forward, you're falling behind. So we resist stillness. We fill the silence. We busy ourselves, even when we're exhausted, just to prove to ourselves and others that we're still in control. But God speaks in the stillness. He always has. From the beginning, his voice hovered over the waters before the world was shaped. When Elijah stood waiting on a word from the Lord, it didn't come through wind or earthquake or fire. It came through a still, small voice. Not a shout, a whisper. And the thing about a whisper is, you have to be quiet to hear it. You have to stop. You have to listen. Stillness is not the absence of activity, it's the presence of peace. It's not about doing nothing, it's about doing the inner work of trust, of surrender, of aligning your heart with God's pace, not your own. Stillness is a posture of faith. It says, I don't have to force the outcome. I don't have to rush the process. I don't have to be the answer to every problem. I can rest because I know God is still at work, even when I am not. This is what makes stillness so counterintuitive. Everything in us wants to move when things go wrong. We want to fix. We want to solve. We want to act. But stillness calls us to pause, to trust that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is wait, to stop striving long enough to recognize that God is not just found in the progress, but in the pause. And here's the mystery. When you stop trying to control everything, peace starts to enter. Slowly at first, like water filling the cracks of a dry riverbed. But it comes. Not because your situation has changed, but because you have. Because you've made space for God's presence to be more than a theory, it becomes a felt reality. In stillness, you start to hear again. You hear the voice that's been drowned out by worry and fear. You hear the quiet assurance that says, you're not alone. I've got this. I've got you. A stillness isn't natural for most of us. It feels risky, vulnerable. Because stillness means we're not in control. It means trusting that God is working behind the scenes, even when we can't see it. And trust like that, deep soul-level trust, can only be developed through time spent in quiet with Him, through sitting with the uncomfortable questions, through choosing not to numb yourself with distractions, through learning to be okay with the unknown, not because it's easy, but because you know who holds the future. Sometimes God allows life to slow us down so we can finally hear what we've been too busy to notice. He brings us to still waters, not just to refresh us, but to reset us, to remind us that we were not made to run on empty, to remind us that He is God and we are not. And in that stillness, things become clear again. Priorities realign, peace returns, faith is renewed. You might feel guilty for resting. You might think, there's so much I need to do, so many things I need to fix. But God's invitation to stillness is not an interruption to your life. It is your life. It's where your soul remembers what truly matters. It's where your spirit breathes again. Rest is not optional. It's sacred. It's holy. It's commanded. Not as a burden, but as a blessing. Jesus himself practiced stillness. He withdrew often. He found solitary places to pray, to connect with the Father, to be. If the Son of God needed stillness, how much more do we? We can't pour from an empty cup. We can't lead others to peace if we ourselves are frantic. We can't hear God clearly when we're drowning in noise. And yet, when you make space for stillness,